gave an indigenous perspective. Roger Williams documented it the best that he knew how as an immigrant to a new land, not knowing the language, not knowing the landscape, and not knowing the people. He documented things, many correctly and many not correctly. And we speak to that in the footnotes, talking about grammar and his understanding of the language or misunderstanding of the language, as well as his perspectives on what he perceived when he was interacting with indigenous people and documenting that down. We also wanted it to be useful for students, and there's a website that supports Roger Williams. It's at the end of this slideshow, so I'll remember it. It's the Roger Williams Initiative. And in that, we have Dawn Dove, who was one of the co-editors here. She's speaking in the language so students could have access to it. And that was part of the goals, to make it a more useful tool for people of the 21st century. So the process. In these pictures is the editorial team: Dawn Dove, a Narragansett tribal elder, Dorothy Papp next to her in the stripes, myself, and Sandy Robinson, and also we have Kathleen Bragdon. Each of those editors has a lovely bio in the back of the book that tells a little bit about them as an author and illustrator. But I will tell you that Dawn Dove is a retired history teacher, and she was a museum educator, and at one point was even the director of this museum. And she was the Narragansett language teacher for many a year, a storyteller and a culture bearer. And that's really important. And as part of this process, we wanted to make sure that we had that perspective. Dorothy Papp was one of the copy editors in this process, and she just had a passion for indigenous cultures and for Roger Williams and the concept of liberty of consciousness. And then Kathleen Bragdon, she's a professor from William and Mary, and she is an author and has written several books about the indigenous peoples of Southern New England, but she's also a linguist. And we had worked on a language project with her a few years back, maybe 10 or 12 years back, and asked her to be part of this project. Sandy Robinson is an environmental research scientist, but she's married into the Narragansett community, her husband and daughters, and she supports them in continuing their traditional art, science, and culture. And she really strived to keep the Narragansett language alive in her household, and certainly has worked with my mother, Dawn, a lot on working on informal dictionaries. And so our team set about this, but there's a lot of other people that we need to recognize that whenever you do a project, you have to have the core group that's going to keep it moving along. And when something's years in the making, it takes a lot of people. But more than anything, in our acknowledgments, we want to acknowledge the Nahaigansek Ninan Nimawanawak, which is the Narragansett people. And I think I mispronounced that, but close enough. One thing you'll learn about I break them up into chunks. Sometimes I miss a syllable, but the people in our elders in our community, they participated in being on the language committee, but our elders are critically important. The language committee and the language program was also very, very important. And then individual tribal members who gave of themselves individual knowledge. That TEK stands for traditional ecological knowledge. Throughout the book, there's all kinds of nuggets of information that's shared. And sometimes we wanted to talk more about it. Sometimes our group had an answer and just wanted to do it then. And sometimes we wanted to reach out to other tribal experts in certain areas of hunting and fishing and celestials and a myriad of other things. We also wanted to thank the Crane Foundation, who supported this project, Neil Safier from the John Carter Brown Library, who gave us the original manuscript, and John McNiff, who later on you're going to see some maps that are in this book, helped us locate some of those historic maps. Robert Geek, who I partnered on a book called From Slaves to Soldiers, the First Rhode Island Regiment in the American Revolution, or Revolutionary War, he recommended West Home Publishing, and we've been working with Bruce Franklin from there since. And then, of course, our families and our communities and our ancestors that came before us. And then, of course, people like you that support this project by wanting to hear more about it and purchasing this book and maybe using it in the future. So, a couple of things that I wanted to note in the preface is that Tomaquag Museum is acting as a bridge with this project, a bridge between the past, the present, and the future, as well as a bridge between native and non-native languages. In this edition of The Key to the Language, as I mentioned before, we made it more friendly and accessible by updating the phrasing, wording, spelling, and style of vocabulary lists in and his observations. But one thing I really want you to know is at the end of each past chapter, there's a section called the more particular, and that's the more particulars are like little poetic pieces that Roger Williams wrote. We left them as they were because we felt that poetry should be left unchanged. So another thing we really wanted people to know is that language changes over time, as do cultural norms and mores and life ways. One of the things that happens when languages are endangered or being reclaimed is people get really stuck on whether you say something correctly or incorrectly, or you accentuate one part of the word and not another. And if you get an opportunity, there's a great podcast. It's called All My Relations. Matika Wilbur and Adrienne Keene. Adrienne Keene is a professor from Brown. She's Cherokee, and Matika's from a tribe out in Washington State. But they have a great episode in part of their season 1. It's about 3/4 of the way through the season. And they have a couple episodes on language. And one of the things they talked about language revitalization projects is that people, a lot of times even your elders, get really stuck on whether people try to remind people is that language changes. No one in America that's speaking English today sounds like their ancestors from 400 years ago, and neither will we. We're influenced by the English that we speak on a daily basis, and we may accentuate different parts of the word that we wouldn't have if we lived long ago. So we wanted people to think about that and to understand that it's an oral language and it changes and evolves. We also wanted people to know that in this Key to the Language, Roger Williams spells things lots of different ways. At the time, English was not as uniform as it is today. But there's also words just in our language, a word like Nakomo, which is one of our 13 Thanksgivings, that can be spelt a myriad of ways using the English phonetic alphabet and still say the same sound. So we wanted people to be aware of that. We also wanted to reflect on a quote. The last thing in our preface is this quote by the late Ella Sikatow, who was the ethnohistorian and language teacher for the Narragansett tribe. And she said, "So long as one person is speaking one word of the language, it continues." And that's really important to us. It's the idea that language is a living thing and we're a living people. And even though we know many more words than one word, our community has perpetuated language through songs, through prayers, through general conversation and greetings. And today, our young people are using technology to actually increase their fluency. And so this is a photograph of Ella Sikatow, and it's really important for us to remember the elders that came before. She was the language teacher before my mother. She served on the language committee up through her passing a few years ago. It was really instrumental. In our archives here at the museum, we have Cecil Addison, who was the language teacher before Ella. So we go into the sort of, I would say, I'll call it the first quarter of the 1900s. And so when you think about detribalization and what that means and how that is affected, that reminds you that we've had continuation of language since the beginning to today. And we're continuing to increase our fluency as a community. So the introduction was written by Kathleen Bragdon. She did an amazing job of telling the history of the creation of the key, which you can read when you're checking out this book. She also did a lot on the historical perspectives from her academic view, the political perspectives, the literary influence, the religious influence, and also the instructional linguistical content, as well as the fact that this book was originally written also to be for entertainment. It was used. The reason Roger Williams did it was so that he could do trade, so that he could create a political place, if you will, by creating a colony. He needed this information in order to be able to do the politics of the region, as well as to influence the community in Christianity and proselytize, as well as just to know how to communicate and to have a relationship with the indigenous people in that time period. So this was one of the things that this introduction tells you. It also speaks a lot about the grammatical constructs that were going on there. And so let me see if I can find that X1X. I always I don't know why, but I can't find that page. Oh well, I'll look for it later, I guess. Oh, here it is. So also that the point, I guess, was that the in telling the portrait of the native culture at this time period, Roger Williams was also giving the information as he of the time to sort of express what he believed the savage, if you will, quote unquote, was like. And so in this conclusion, I just want to read one section, and it is the very last section, the conclusion of the introduction. Tomaquag Museum has produced and edited this newest edition of Roger Williams' Key into the Language of America to highlight the Narragansett people's unique view of this celebrated work, and to remind readers that Williams was the fortunate beneficiary of Narragansett generosity and wisdom, without which the key could not have been written. Through modern tribal members, we can still hear echoes of the 17th century Narragansett world he tried to convey. Talbot Mikwayan Nyayan Namayan. I thank you for remembering me. And I just love that quote. Why is this not turning a page? There we go. So one of the things we wanted you to know is that in this book, we share a lot of pictures, and each one is from our collections in the museum. And throughout the book, we try to put images that supported the vocabulary. So like that macaque, you might see a birch bark container, but you might not have an envisionment of what a birch bark container looks like. And so we put that in. And they're all from our collections and from the Narragansett community. So this first image I want to express. So if you, when you have the book in front of you, you'll look on page 34. If you happen to have it with you, you can look with me, but that's why I put the pictures in the PowerPoint. So if you don't, you can still see it. In the PowerPoint, you get to have color images. In the book, they're in black and white. But we wanted people to know different things about the images. So in the word spoon, where is it? Why don't I thought I had it highlighted. Ganam num awag, which is spoons. But you know, when you see a spoon, if it just had the word spoons, people would envision the spoon that's in the drawer with the rest of their silverware and not envision these wooden spoons, which were more a utensil than an individual spoon for individual eating. So also, in the book, there's different observations. I'm going to read you the observation that's on page 35. And it's, instead of shells, they have several baskets in which they put all of their household stuff. They have some great bags or sacks made of hemp, which will hold 5 or 6 bushels. So in this observation, underneath it, the next word, takwonk, weshawonk, a pounding mortar. And then the observation, their women constantly grind all their corn by hand, pound it, and take as much pain as people in the world, whose labor is without question one cause of their extraordinarily ease of childbirth. So the first footnote is with corn, and that is corn is considered, this is how we responded to it. Or so we don't, sometimes in this case, there's nothing wrong with what he said about corn. It's just that we gave more information. So corn is considered a symbol of fertility among many indigenous communities, including the Narragansett. And then the second one is to do with his comment about ease of childbirth. Williams made assumptions regarding the ease of childbirth because of the manual labor of women in the production of corn. Women not only grew the corn, but also other crops such as beans, squash, and melons. They harvested wild edibles such as field greens, berries, nuts, seeds, roots, and tubers. Along with these activities, they participated in fishing, shellfishing, and collecting maple sap. Men and women worked hard throughout the year to provide food, shelter, tools, and other materials for the community. Each person, as in any society, has roles and responsibilities. And then when you're looking at the footnotes, you'll notice that sometimes it says KB. And if it's KB, it means Katie Bragdon or Kathleen Bragdon made the response. It was common for English writers of this period to remark upon how hard Native women worked, possibly meant as a slight to Native men. So in this image, you also see the pounding mortar, which we gave you. We actually have acorns in our mortar as opposed to corn, but the purpose was to remind people that we were pounding and grinding more than just corn. Sometimes when something's written, it gets over focused on and only becomes that one thing that people are thinking about. So in this one, this is the word waesek, a knife. So the observation. The reason they call the Englishmen chakwakwonk, meaning knife men, is because of the metal knife or chakwak the English used. Prior to the presence of the English, they used stone instead of metal for their knives, awls, awl blades, hatchets, and hoes. This is our footnote. The Narragansett also used bone and antler for awls, scrapers, and hoes. Today, there are still many Narragansett artists using stone, bone, and antler for making tools and art pieces. And so on that particular page, we have this image that just says stone, spear point, knife, and arrow point, and of course from our Tomaquag Museum collection. So here's an example on page 37 where we're talking about a grammatical issue. And the vocabulary is sun. Give it to me again. And then our footnote is sun was added for a yes or no question. Also, pish was added because it denoted the future tense. And in the footnotes, we tell you what Williams originally wrote, which was wonk commission. So he was missing the sun and the pish that would make it a question, yes or no, and a future tense. Observation. Most commonly, their households are open and their door is I read that wrong. And their door is a hanging mat, which is lifted up and falls down by itself. Yet many of them get English boards and nails and make artificial doors and bolts themselves. And others make smaller doors of birch or chestnut bark, which they secure with a cord at night or when they go out of town. The last person out secures the door and goes out through the chimney, which is a large opening in the middle of their house called a wananachi komak, a chimney or smoke hole. And the command is anama, which is help me, because you might need help getting out of a smoke hole. But I suppose our ancestors were much more agile than we are today in trying to do these things. So as I mentioned before, were many maps in our book. Well, I shouldn't say many, a few maps in our book. And this is on page 51. Feels like I didn't I skipped something here. But let me just make sure there's not one. No. All right. I feel like there's something in between that, but we'll skip over and maybe go back to that. So the maps, this particular footnote here, page 40. I feel like I should still read this one. So I'm going to read this one because I feel like it leads up to the next one. I don't know why I don't have it lovely highlighted in yellow, but I don't. So this is the observation. Many of them naturally princes. This happens to be, let me see if I can tell you the chapter title here for a second. This is where it's weird when you're on Zoom. Oh, it's the household. So many of them naturally princes, or else industrious persons are rich. The poor among them will say they want for nothing. So one of the things that we wrote in this footnote to go along with that is Williams refers to the Narragansett with the royal title of princes, often in reference to leaders from each village as well as the leaders of the tribe as a whole. The Narragansett did not have royalty in the way that was common in Europe at the time. The Narragansett cared for their whole community and shared the resources. A person was considered most respected when they gave to others. There was not the concept of poverty nor wealth in a Western way of thinking. The community worked together for the common good of all. Even today, tribal members who hunt, fish, or gather not only share with those in their immediate family, but with elders, the sick, and others that are not able to participate in those activities. The next footnote I wanted to note is this one. It's the chapter 8 on communications and news. And this is page 51. To hear any news, they sit in a circle, double or triple or more, as their numbers determine. I have seen near 1,000 in a round where English could not have seated near half as many. Every man has a pipe of their tobacco and keeps a deep silence and gives attention to the speaker. And many of them will speak either relating news or in consultation, with very emphatical speech and great action, commonly an hour and sometimes 2 hours together. So this is our footnote. Even today, the Narragansett, along with other native communities, speak in talking circles. We often utilize a feather or stick to denote the speaker. All will listen intently while the speaker shares, and others do not speak until the talking stick or feather is passed to them, and then all will listen to their words. And this is true. I mean, we had a talking circle just a couple of weeks ago, maybe even a couple of days ago, and we did one virtually. But just before COVID hit, we did one right here at Tomaquag Museum in partnership with the Mashantucket Vocational Rehabilitation Department. And then we did one with them online recently as we were all doing things virtually. So this is another observation, again with princes and royalty. It says observation, Kananwu and Wananunwu Iwu are words of great flattery, which they use to each other, but constantly to their princes. At their speeches, if the princes are eloquent, they esteem them gods as Herod among the Jews. And this is footnote 12. Well, let me do 11 and 12, because I think that's the first one. Narragansett people did not have royalty in the European sense, nor did not use the term such as prince. Our leaders were and still are known as the sachem or sachemwag. Some Narragansett people today claim that they descend from a royal line of past sachems such as Ninigret, Canonicus, or Quiapin. However, this concept of royalty was a European construct and is an interpretation that has been adopted over time by some indigenous people. And then Katie Bragdon makes a footnote. This is an important statement, and this is talking about calling them gods, of the Narragansett view of truth. Wait a minute, let me make sure. Yep. Direct experience, the knowledge that comes with age. which their language itself marks grammatically. So she's talking about grammar and constructs. So I want to read another. Let me just see where we're at time-wise. We're doing pretty good. I've got a few more I want to share. This is chapter 12, and it is Heavens and Heavenly Light, and it is page, I don't know why I don't have this page on here, but I don't, 72. And the observation says, by Kisaquan, they acknowledge the sun and adore it as a god or divine power. And this is our footnote. The Narragansett respect the earth and celestials. We celebrate and honor the spirit in all creation. However, that does not mean we think of the sun as a god. We honor the gift of the sun, the light, heat, energy, and beauty. The spirit of God is in the sun. Manet, Manatu, and Katantawit are words that mean God, creator, great spirit. Just as in English, we can use many words to describe God. We honor the gifts and spirit of all creation. This is page 91. So Tamak. Tamak means beaver. And I picked that word because the word Tomaquag today means beavers in the plural. It's a little bit shorter than our ancestors once said it. So it's Tomaquag in a more correct pronunciation. And so the observation, Tamak is a beast of wonder for cutting and pulling great pieces of trees with its teeth. I have often seen fair streams and rivers dammed and stopped up with sticks and earth by them. Upon these dammed up streams, a tamak builds his house with levels where he sits dry in his chambers or goes into the water at his pleasure. And the next one. The Indians say they have black foxes, which they have often seen, but never could take any of them. They say they are manatus, that is, gods, spirits, or divine powers, as they say of everything which they cannot comprehend. This is Katie's comment. The quality of sacredness in humans, animals, and in the natural surroundings that many Native Americans recognize is clearly misunderstood by Williams. And so I finally have come to this map that's on page 95, showing this map of Narragansett Bay, which I thought was really important, and it's in the chapter called The Sea. And it's showing the ways in which we travel throughout the region, and going from our inland villages to our coastal villages, and using the river systems as a means of travel, as a way to hunt and fish and gather, as a means for finding locations for trade, amongst other things. So here's the observation on this. Mashoon is an Indian boat or dugout canoe made of pine, oak, or chestnut. I have seen a native go into the woods with his hatchet, carrying only a basket of corn with him and stones to strike a fire. Once he has felled his tree, if it is a chestnut tree, he makes himself a little house or shed of the bark. Then he builds several small fires along the length of the trunk and watches over the burning of it. With a brook nearby, he boils his corn, has his water to drink, and sometimes angles for fish. As he continues burning and hewing until he finishes the dugout canoe within 10 or 12 days, staying there at his work alone, he gets help to launch his boat and afterwards ventures out with it to fish in the ocean. And I love that description of the burning of a dugout canoe and the time that it takes. You know, today people often ask us, well, how long does it take to do such a thing? You know, we have a great estimate there of about 12 days. But when you come and visit here at Tomaquag Museum, we have beautiful birch bark canoes, and they're a different format and a different way that you make that kind of a canoe. But there's different words here about canoes. And one of our footnotes is that we also made them out of birch, because all the types of trees he mentions there, he doesn't mention birch. And today, that's a very common, or historically, that was a very common tree that we were using. And we have an 1840s birch bark canoe that's a Narragansett canoe that's above our head. This is page 112. So this observation: through this feasting and gifts, the devil encourages pleasantries of their worship, as he does all false worships, by such plausible earthly arguments of uniformities, universalities, antiquities, immunities, dignities, rewards, unto submitters and the contrary to refusers, so that they run far and near and ask Awan Nakamet, who makes a feast? So here's our footnote for that. William's perspective is one from the Christian faith, which espouses that all religions not derived from Christianity are the devil's work, or heathen, pagan, or infidel. Despite his goal for religious freedom, for which he is most remembered, he is not respectful to the indigenous people's spiritual beliefs. The Narragansett are a prayerful people, greeting the day in prayer, working in prayer, and celebrating in prayer. Nakomo is an example of this faith. Giving thanks to the Creator for the blessings in our lives, the Nakomo gifts were perceived by Williams as beyond their means. In our culture today, we still continue Nakomo. We also believe a gift worth giving should almost hurt the giver to give. That shows the respect for the one giving, as well as honoring the Creator. And so that was all based on the term Nakomo, which I had mentioned earlier, because Nakomo means a giveaway. And there's actually quite, on page 110 and 111, it goes into depth about a Nakomo, or a feast, or a dance, and a powwow as the spiritual leader. And so in this passage next, there is 120. These words, Inach Anin Anawa, and it means let my words stand. And our footnote is this, that the late Ella C. Cattell, tribal ethno-historian, ended her invocation or speeches with these powerful words. And in my own memory, you know, I can remember her saying them in my whole lifetime and listening to her say them. And they are very, very powerful words. These are the kinds of things that are continued on in our community. And in the next observation, it says, I never observed an excess of scandalous sins among them, as commonly seen in Europe. Generally, they do not know the sins of drunkenness and gluttony, although they haven't so much to restrain them, both in respect of the knowledge of God and laws of men, as the English have. A man never hears of crimes among them, such as robbery, murders, adulteries, etc., as he does among the English. I believe that in England, the glorious sun lights so much truth it hardens our English hearts. For what the sun doesn't soften, it hardens. And that was Roger Williams' observation. Here's our footnote. Europeans introduced alcohol to the indigenous people to manipulate easier access to native resources and land and to gain power. It was truly a tool of war and supported European greed. It is painful how the introduction of these vices were used to gain access to our resources, divide our people, and conquer our nation. And so on page 162, it reflects on this paint pot that's in there. In the book, it's a slightly different pot, but it's still, they're both pots from our collection. And so in this chapter, which is called Paintings, it tells you a lot of different colors like Wampi and Suki, Mishkwi, Wasawi, Askaski, Pashawi, all different colors, white, black, red, yellow, green, blue. So they're talking about different colors and painting. And so this is a set of words. Kamachi Tiawawash. Kaskiska, Kaskisakwash. Almost couldn't get that one out. So in this one, the general observation: it has been foolish custom of all barbarous nations to paint and figure their faces and bodies as it also has been our shame and grief, in parentheses. We may remember it of some of our forefathers in this nation, end parentheses. How much then are we bound to our most holy maker for so much knowledge of himself revealed in mankind's civility and piety? And how should we long for and work toward an America that we may partake of our mercy? And this is the only more particular I'm going to read. Truth is a native, naked beauty, but lying invention are but Indian paints. Disassembling hearts, their beauties but a lie. Truth is the proper beauty of God's saints. Foul are the Indians' hair and painted faces. More foul such hair, such face in Israel. England so calls herself, yet thee, Absalom, foul hair and face of Jezebel. Paints will not bide Christ's washing flame of fire. Feigned inventions will not bide such storms. Oh, that we may prevent him, that betimes repentance tears may wash of all such forms. So Roger Williams is really not happy with all this face painting going on. And we made this remark. Williams is representing his Eurocentric or Puritan view regarding our culture, beliefs, spirituality, and mores. We use painting to express ourselves, enhancing or beautifying ourselves for ceremonial purposes, including marriage, rites of passage, death rituals, and many others. The designs and colors used reflect the purpose of the body painting. And so throughout this book, we have many, many other quotes and comments in regards to each chapter that is presented. But we wanted you also to know that this is a community knowledge in this book. And yes, there's primary people that are doing it, but in the top picture here is some of the elders that got together and worked on language. And we used a lot of archival resources. And in our archives, we just had a young man who's Narragansett and Shinnecock, who was getting his master's in library sciences. And just before the COVID crazy happened, he was here working on making a language finding aid. If you don't know about archives, a finding aid is basically a way in which to find all the different documents and materials, including audios and videos and other kinds of digital assets. And so we have, I don't know exactly the number, but I'm going to say probably 75 or more items that are language items. Some, certainly a lot of them are Narragansett, but we also had other Ojibwe and Cherokee and Anishinaabe and other tribal nations. So language is important and those things. And our committee and language program at the tribe are important, but also here at the museum, it's another way in which we as a community can increase language through our Children's Hour programs, which you can get on our website virtually right now. Silver Moon LaRose, our assistant director, is doing those programs. And we incorporate language. Just this week, she was incorporating language into the words for warrior and reflecting on that in the language since it's Memorial Day weekend. And so these are continuous things that are going on, and we incorporate it in our music. In the lower picture, there's kids in there learning songs, and I'm actually in that picture as well. And we wrote songs because language continues when it's a living language if there's new works. And so there's songs like Kanashawank, which is one written by the elders that is a memorial song for Great Swamp, and Wakoni Neep, which is a song for maple sugaring. And so all of these things continue to move forward. The young woman on the left here, she wrote the song Saquon, which is about spring, renewal, and rebirth, both figuratively and spiritually, and the cycles of life inclusive. and the idea of our ceremonies and 13 Thanksgivings and how they continue our culture and our language going forward. And in Roger Williams Key, he reflects on those cultural norms, but he is torn between his Puritan and Christian background and in his understanding of our culture and our traditions. So throughout the book, we reflect on that. And then for us as a community that worked on this book and are continuing our language, it's for the next generations to come. There is my niece and my daughter, when they graduated from high school, and the importance of culture and tradition. They were both honored with eagle feathers for their work and the things that they did in their high school career. And now they're both college students, one at the University of Rhode Island, and the other is a Brown RISD dual degree student, Sharente is. And my daughter Laurel is in pre-vet, but the thing that I wanted to share with you is they both went off to college carrying not only the key into the language of America, but the Natick dictionary and other language tools. So they find that language is really important to them, and they're bringing that forward to the next generations to come. And then you get a beautiful picture of my grandson, Minakisu Miquin, when he was really little, and he's in the cradle board that my husband made. And those are all things that are important in our community and that bring them forward. So on this last page, there's a bunch of resources. There's, of course, Tomaquag Museum, and you can go on to our resource page and learn more about Roger Williams in other kinds of ways, because there's partnerships that we've done with RISD, as well as with the Roger Williams Initiative, that we can connect you. So if you don't keep track of these, most of these links are on our website as well. You can go to West Home Publishing to get the Key into the Language of America book for yourself. Since we're not open, when we are open, you can get the book here. We do send them to people. Sometimes people want to buy them directly from us, and we do send them to you as well if you want to go that way. Then there's the roadtour.org, which we partnered with the Rhode Island Council on the Humanities for, and we did the First Peoples Road Tour. And I mentioned several Native leaders, Canonicus, my Aunt Tonomi, and others, and we did a lot of histories. And it's called the tour because you go around the state to historical places, but you're also learning about historical people, and that history goes from the 1600s to today, because we remind everybody that we're living people. You also might be interested in the Publix Radio's Mosaic podcast. Episodes 3 through 6 are focused on Indigenous people, and the third one actually is about Roger Williams and the intersectionality between Roger Williams and Indigenous peoples and the Pequot massacre. And so you might find that to be particularly interesting. So with that, I'm going to break out of that and see if I can stop the sharing so that I can see you and you can ask me questions. There's a chat comment here. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Alana. I see a comment from her. So I'm wondering if there's anyone that, I have to admit, it is often awkward because you're kind of talking like to a blank screen from my perspective while I'm going on. So I do love when I can see your faces, and feel free, you can either type me something or you can just pop on and ask us something, and I'm happy to share anything else that you might like to know. Hi, Alana.
I'm just curious, Loren, what are the language classes like that you have for tribal members? You know, is it formal classes? Is it more taught in the home? Is it all ages?
Well, so our community is very much about intergenerational. So we pretty much do everything intergenerationally. So language classes is intergenerational. I have these huge binders that got games and songs and prayers and grammar. I think we learn best when it's not grammar and you're just talking, even when you make mistakes. You always have to remind yourself, like, languages, you learn a language if you speak it and it has meaning to you, and you just correct grammar as you go along and you get better at it. So I think that language programs that focus on communication and conversation do a lot better. And so we do a lot of that. Sometimes we script them. I know the elders had done one where they did a whole scripting of language that was all around finger weaving, so that while they were doing their finger weaving, I'll call it workshop, we're tribal, we all know each other, we're all family in some way, so we might call it a class, but it doesn't act like a class, like in sort of a straight American way of thinking of a class. We've got food, we've got people, we've got kids, everybody's there. So yes, we do some formal lessons. I mean, I've taught classes and done camps and programs at the tribe. My mother, Ella, others, my sister, my brother-in-law. But there's also lots of other informal language going on, because the reality is, a few years back, we did a survey. Everybody in the community that did the survey, which was probably a good eighth of our population, all thought it was important, all thought they wanted to be fluent. Nobody wanted to go to class, because, class is 1 day or 2 days. Like, we were doing a Tuesday night and a Wednesday afternoon or whatever. And so elders would go to the afternoon one and families would go to the other, depending on the age of the elder. And people have stuff to do. It's a modern world. There's a lot happening, minus COVID. People have sports and they've got after school programs and they've got, this thing and that thing to do. So that's where technology really comes in. And young people have created Facebook pages, which are to get you to speak Narragansett. And, people are just talking and communicating on there in Narragansett. And that's a really good way to be. I get asked a lot to do opening prayers of different sorts, I pass the buck a lot of times to my mother as well. But like, I'm doing one tonight for a Franciscan program, and at 7:30. So that's something that we get asked to do. But young people are able to do it. There's lots of different people that have that capacity. And I think the more you use it, the more you internalize it, the more you're able to, be more fluent off your tongue. Does anybody else have a question or a comment?
I can unmute everybody so that you don't have to go looking for your.
With some really solid statements.
Deb, were you asking a question?
No.
Loren?
Not.
I also see on the chat questions about.
Okay, I guess Deb didn't. I thought somebody had a question there. Oh, Susie.
Loren, I just wanted to say, as always, your presentations are so enlightening and helpful. And I loved the question about the language. Sometimes I get a little envious that I'm not able to partake anymore. But when I have gone out to the museum and I've partaken in the dances, I have always thoroughly enjoyed that experience. And many times I walk away saying, gosh, I wish the museum was in a place where more people would venture to it instead of it being tucked away.
We're working on it.
I know you are.
We are very much working on it. Fingers crossed, and things are really percolating behind the scenes here.
Oh,
Despite
good.
COVID, we have a new master plan for or an updated, because we did it last year, but we added a little bit of tweaks to it this year. We actually have been fundraising behind the scenes and raised $100,000 for the architectural and engineering planning. And if our license agreement gets finalized, which is supposed to go before the other entity's board in June, if that all keeps going the way that it's been going positively, we'll have a license agreement for the land, and then we would be able to hopefully, you know, do the actual capital campaign. It's about a $4 million project, but when we get there, we're doing behind the scenes fundraising right as we speak for grant writing and things like that. So as we're juggling COVID, keeping our doors, figuratively open, we've been really working hard to keep our staff. We have a small staff to begin with. We're understaffed. We have 5 currently. We had 6 just before COVID happened. An educator left for personal reasons, and of course with COVID we didn't rehire somebody right now, so we're keeping ourselves at 5 until things get more stable. But we're working really hard to keep ourselves visible. If you haven't been on our website, we've been posting all kinds of educational resources on our education page. We have a whole Children's Hour page, and by the way, it might call it Children's Hour, but it's really Family Hour because we do it. We probably should change it to Family Hour, because really it's always intergenerational. Even when we were on site, we had toddlers to teenagers and their parents, grandparents, or caregivers, and everybody learned something because it's content most people don't know. So
and I kind of like, if you guys talk about having gatherings, I think it is a family gathering instead of a, bear witness to it. I wanted to ask 2 questions.
Sure.
I saw a picture, you refer to your mom. So remember I donated a postcard to you? When I was a little girl, my parents took me up not by the gift barn, but up by Hungry Haven, up that road. And is that your relative who lived on the right-hand side?
Tall Oak?
Tall Oak.
Yeah, he's still living. Matter of fact, I've been bringing his groceries on during COVID.
So that's the postcard that I have, is Tall Oak, and who was his mom?
Taddy, I think is what her name was.
Who's the other woman in the postcard?
His wife, Pat?
No, Red Wing.
Oh, it's just 2. He's in a postcard with his whole family. That's what I was envisioning.
Okay.
So
I had the
Red Wing. Yeah, Princess Red Wing.
Princess Red Wing.
So he's the one. It's the one where he's young. The one that you have, he's young.
Yes.
Young.
So I probably got that in the 60s. In the 60s probably. That's how old that postcard is. So is there a chance that you would be able to have a place on that road?
That's not where we're looking.
Oh.
So I can't tell you the wheres yet because it's still a secret. Until ink is dry, you have to keep it a secret. But I'll put this out there, that you might be hearing something in the next 3 to 6 months, because we probably won't make a big fanfare until we're closer to the capital campaign time. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Otherwise, people get excited, and are like, "Are you moving tomorrow?" And you still have 100 million things still to do. But we're doing a lot of the behind the scenes grant writing for the grant funders that do capacity, infrastructure stuff. So it's coming.
One other quick question: as an educator, is there any way for you to tap into Brown or URI or other students that could be non-paid interns that could?
Yeah, I mean, until COVID happened, when COVID-19 happened, we had right on every week about 7. I mean, we only have so much space, so we were pretty maxed out just before COVID-19 happened. We had about 7 students that were coming, just regularly. But every semester they're different. But even with COVID, that was the 7 that were on site. But we worked with Providence College this semester and did 4 or 5 different projects. Sometimes we have projects and they get old and we need them to be spruced back up, but you only have so much time in a day, so they keep getting shoved to the side. So we had a curriculum project. They were 3 different curricula that I wrote, but I wrote one of them 10, 12 years ago. And so, I mean, even the branding for the organization wasn't right anymore. So there was so much stuff that needed to be fixed for it to be out there. So they did a bunch of updates for curriculum. Another group did our YouTube page. Another one was working on our resources page. Even though it has great resources, it's not aesthetically appealing because it's just links and words. So they have made a map of what it could look like if we did a much more visual version of it. And so we're hopefully going to be able to implement that in the next few months. And then, so that's an example, but we've worked with the John Nicholas Brown Center for the Public Humanities.
Oh, great.
We had a big project that we were going to do with them, but COVID knocked that one completely out. The difference between them and the PC project is we had already established the projects with PC and we'd already gotten all the stuff lined up. And so when COVID happened, we were able to take it virtual because they had the stuff they needed.
Oh, that's nice.
And with the student that had done the language, the language finding aid, he had been here for several months. And so he had what he needed, and our archivist helped him virtually finish up.
Nice.
But then we had other students that they were here and their job was to be here. Well, then they just couldn't be here. And others that we just hadn't established the project enough to continue. But as soon as, we get to a point where students can be back, we'll go back to that. And we do have a lot of volunteers. We're always welcome to more. So if you love to volunteer, archives and scanning and writing up inventories and a variety of other things that way is always something that needs to be done. We miss one of our most steadfast volunteers, Libby. She's been coming for years now, maybe 3 years in a row, and she's been working. She had experience, but she was working in collections and helping us rehouse our cultural materials to care for them in general, to document and care for them, but also in preparation for a future move, because you can't just go, okay, here's a new place and you just got to take stuff and you don't have any of it packaged or in a cared way. So yeah.
Great information. Always helpful.
Oh, I'm so glad. So nice to see you, Susie.
Good to see you as well.
Is there anyone else that has a question or a thought?
Mm-hmm.
I like your flowers in the background.
Well, Mother's Day.
Nice.
Someone remembered. So.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good. I'm so happy to see this presentation. Thank you so much. And I'm trying to think of a question for you, but as always, I feel like you go into such great depth and detail, and you kind of, I just love hearing what comes from you, and you pick out such interesting, in the book, such interesting examples of how, your perspective is so important to the narrative, and it really is your narrative and your people's narrative to tell. So just thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Anybody
Did Faith
else?
have something that she wanted to say?
Who's that?
I saw Faith pop up and I didn't know if she had something to say.
Well, I was just wondering if there is a opportunity within the high school, at the high school level, I assume, maybe middle school and high school level, for a elective on language, native language. Is that something that's been considered?
So that's a tricky one. And part of the reason that it's tricky is because of our history and how we were detribalized in the 1880s. And almost every school district in the state has 2% or less Narragansett, never mind, Native people, never mind just Narragansett people. So it becomes a struggle. I think if we were going to try to battle that through, I think we'd have to do it at the college level first, and then maybe work backwards rather than forward. I think we might have a better chance at that level. So I know in our museum, as we continue to grow and do some different things, we would like to increase, and maybe when we get to our new facility, actually have language classes at the museum as an opportunity. And maybe that would be the way in which we could build a curriculum in order to be able to then implement it in a bigger way. That's, we have young people.
What year do they start studying Rhode Island history? Third grade, fourth
Third
grade?
grade.
Third
Yeah.
grade. Okay.
So, but unfortunately, I mean, we're working with various districts, and we have been doing staff development, professional development programs over the years. We're working on being more overt about our solicitation of people doing that, because believe it or not, we do many more PD type things in Massachusetts than in Rhode Island. So we've been working a little harder to be more visible for that. And we are booking more and more of those kinds of professional development programs. And because the school districts are really struggling. And, I was a teacher, a classroom teacher, and unfortunately what happens is if they don't already know, they keep kind of regurgitating what they didn't learn properly the first time when they were a student, and they pass it along again incorrectly. And so what we've been trying to do is broaden, as much as we want to go into classrooms and be with students, in order to really make systemic change, we have to get with the adults. And if we can get with the adults, because, no matter how many classrooms you get in as an enrichment kind of program, there's many other classrooms that don't get it. And so there has to be a way to get that information to teachers. And so we're always encouraging them. I mean, our YouTube page has quite a lot of resources. Our website, we have a spot that has educational resources, and we try to get people to use them. And one of the things that when we're working with the education program at PC, that class that we were doing, part of the reason for doing it was to make things kind of line up better for teachers. The problem of being a small place, you can have this cognitive know-how as a teacher that it would make life easier for a teacher, but the time to actually do it is another thing. And so that's sort of how we've been tackling it. That's why things like the road tour, we work with the Rhode Island Council on that's the Rhode Island Council on the Humanities for the road tour. But the Rhode Island Historical Society, I just wrote 3 curriculum essays on Narragansett history, and I'm actually going to do a 4th one. I believe they just asked me recently to round it out. And then once that 4th one is done, there'll be a whole little unit there on Narragansett history for teachers.
That would be great.
And it's just every project is kind of a battle. It's like, we do one book project, then another book project, then another book project, but it's because there's not enough out there. We really want to support people. We're actually working on a project to republish Strawberry Thanksgiving, which is a children's book written by my aunt Paula Dove Jennings, and the artist is Ramona Peters, who's Wampanoag. It's a wonderful story. It's timeless, but just like, book publishers, they move on to other things after so many years. And we just we have a friend from Books on the Pond, and she's been helping us go through the rigmarole of how you find out who owns the rights to the book. And it has finally been released from the publisher. And it took a long time. And so we got the releases from both the author and the illustrator to be able to republish the book. We're going to add new photographs and new documents about Strawberry Thanksgiving from our archives. And
Nice.
and then it's going to have the core children's book that was already there will still be there, but it will have these added updated pictures and a variety of other things. So that will be really, really a lot of fun. Our original hope was to have it done for this Strawberry Thanksgiving. That won't happen because COVID happened. But our goal is to, even if whenever right now we're still behind in even getting the behind the scenes work done, because everybody, including the bookstore folks and us, are having our own, things that you have to do because of COVID-19. So I am, it'll happen sometime this year, and we'll probably do a soft rollout. And then when Strawberry Thanksgiving comes next year, we'll do something big.
That's interesting.
Well, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Loren. I know you
Oh,
have
you're welcome.
another engagement after this, right, at 7:30. So you
I do.
yeah, you're booked today. So, but thank you so much
Oh,
for
you're welcome.
do this. I can't. We actually don't have a copy of the book at the library yet, so I will have to get a copy. I'll there it is. I'll have to get a copy from Westholm
Yes.
or wait till you're open. But I think I'll just order one.
Yeah.
And the links that you shared in that last slide, I'm going to grab those, everyone, and post those.
Oh, that'd be great.
And then I remembered to record about 3 or 4 minutes into starting. But Faith, I will figure out how to post that as well.
And I just went on to the website to make sure that I check back into that. The more people you get to check into it, the higher it goes into the filter. The algorithm is to tap it more frequently so that it floats to the top so more people will see it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Take good care.
Take good care and hope to see you soon.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for hosting this.
My pleasure.
Sarah, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.